Hi, Christie.
Hi, Jess.
We're recording now.
The many hours of conversation you and I have had, we've
Yeah.
had probably half of them that haven't been recorded.
You know what we should do? We should start a podcast.
You think? Let's call it the why and the buy. How
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to this edition of the Why and the Buy podcast. I'm Jeff Bajorek here, as always, with the lovely Christie Walters. How are you today, Christie?
Oh, I'm doing great. And I love it when you introduce me with lovely in front of my name.
Well, I only know how to speak the truth. It is a blessing and a curse, but in this case, it's definitely a blessing. So we were kind of talking before we recorded today that we wanted to go back into the archives to grab a conversation that we had many, many days ago about attitude and the importance of a positive attitude. Not just the importance of it, but the necessity of a positive attitude. So we wanted to share with you, our loyal listeners and loving fan base, everything we had to say about this topic. Enjoy.
We are going to talk about the little gold book of yes attitude.
It's a little gold book. I keep calling it the little yellow book.
Did I say the little yellow book?
Oh, you said gold book, but I'm
I did.
calling myself out. You, as usual, are correct, Christie.
I have probably taught on this book more than any of Jeffrey's material. And I love it. I love how the audience engages in the activities when we talk through this book.
I get a lot of nodding heads.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, and it's a little dangerous in that most people think their attitude's fine. So when you go to advertise or to market or to discuss the need for a positive attitude, it gets shooed away or pushed aside because most people believe that they have a great attitude. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I really like about this book. And I think there are people in this world who understand the value of a great attitude. And there are people who don't, right? But most of the people who understand it feel that they have a great one because they understand that they need one. And it's just not the case. And one of the ways that this book opens, you're very near the front, is, all right, take this test. I dare you. Start thinking about all these ways that these little things that creep into your daily life that make an attitude very, very difficult to maintain. Then when you think about it, the way you approach what you do is at the very core of everything that you do. It's certainly very closely related and certainly in size to your why, right? I mean, why you do things is important, but once you understand your why, your attitude is tremendously important in the foundation of how and, the way that you approach things, and it gets taken for granted constantly. So what's interesting is you have a conversation with someone, how's your attitude? Oh, no, it's great. It's awesome. Right. And then you get in and the people that decide to listen to you talk about it, they're gripped immediately because they're woken up right away that, oh man, there's a lot more to this. And
Well, in true Jeffrey fashion, he does an amazing job of calling you out in the very beginning of the book. So it's like if you ever complained about traffic or weather or watched TV for more than 30 minutes a day or watched the news for more than 30 minutes a day. Have you ever complained about work at home or home at work? I mean, everyone in the audience, usually I do one of those stand up, sit down type exercises and say, once you find one that fits for you, go ahead and have a seat. And almost without fail, everyone sits down on the first one.
Right.
And then how much time have you spent actually studying attitude? Right. Most important factor in success in our careers and our family lives. It's important in our social lives. It's important. Our attitude is important in our spiritual lives. Mm-hmm. Yet we spend none in formal education on attitude. Right.
It's a muscle that needs to be flexed.
Yes.
Or it will waste away.
Right.
And yeah, it's constantly taken for granted, yet it's more important than any of us really realizes. And in typical Gitomer fashion, you're punched in the face in about page 4. Right? And then he comes over and he pats you on the back a little bit and he shows you how to
be okay.
Yeah, that's great. The lessons in here are just so simple, which, is one of the reasons that they're overlooked, but it's not a difficult thing once you prioritize,
Right.
these concepts. I don't do the stand up, sit down thing. I got burned with that early on because when I actually participated in a class where they did that, I didn't win the prize because the one that I went out on was just earlier in the line than everybody else.
Yeah.
What's the order of these questions? That's ridiculous. I would have made it through. Everybody else sat down on this one. I don't won. So I just don't make people sit up and stand up and sit.
Well, I do try not to make it a competition, but
Oh, I typically do it. No, when I do it or when I've done it that way, it's like, okay, if you're the last one standing, you win a book, right? Or you win
right.
The promotional item of the week. What's interesting too is that people are a lot more honest when they don't have to sit up or stand up or sit down.
Yeah.
Because there's a certain anxiety around, especially if you're around people you don't know. But I'll look around the room when I'm presenting. You make eye contact with some people and you can tell when someone's engaged and right there with you and they're nodding because, or they roll their eyes or put their head in their hands and they're like, yeah, they know it. And more people are willing to acknowledge it that way than are willing to participate. Right.
Yeah.
But it's something that hits home with everybody. And I don't care what line of work you're in. I don't care what, or if you're even professional in any regard. I mean, as a parent, the feelings, the emotions, and the foundation of those that you bring to your daily life, they need to be tuned up. They need to be maintained.
Right.
How many times do we get going and we're in a rut or whatever it is, and you just need a break, right? Well, we're working on this stuff, maintaining it. Covey talked about your production and production capability balance, right? So you can only produce so much without sharpening the saw and maintaining your ability to produce. That's all of this. That's what it is.
Yeah. It's really tactical. And that's one of the things I love about his books is that there are tactical ways to approach this topic and implement immediately. There are things that you could do today before the end of the day today that can have an impact on your attitude. And it's not a quick fix, right? It is something you'll do the rest of your life. And hopefully you have an accountability partner that reminds you when you're maybe a little bit off center.
Yes.
So
yeah, no,
I know I have to be reminded on a regular basis.
One day I'll be sitting down and my wife will get frustrated with me and say, what planet have you been on for the last 3 weeks? And I'm like, oh yeah. Okay. And that's when I know I need to reevaluate. Right. And what I like about this book, a book like Think and Grow Rich, like Napoleon Hill, that's a bigger, more conceptual volume when it comes to attitude. That is introducing the concept of attitude to people who have not thought about it before. And it's completely different than this. This, I believe, is very powerful for a tune-up where it's like, oh yeah, no, that thing. Because Napoleon Hill used a lot of words. It was 80 years ago.
Yeah.
Such a relentless editor that he won't allow there to be more words than absolutely necessary. It's edited to a point where someone like me can read it. I mean, there's big print and pictures. This is my kind of book, right? So when it comes to that, it's very easy to utilize for a tune-up purpose, rather than, oh my gosh, this is blowing my mind. I didn't even think about this whole concept, right? I think that this may not be the best book for that. This assumes that you have a working knowledge of how important attitude is, and it's a good sure for that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think, was there anything that surprised you when you read this book? If you can remember back to when you first read it.
The first time I read it was a few years ago, and what I listened to it actually is how I get a lot of my books.
Me too.
The simple nature of it was not really surprising, but he says right in the very beginning, he's like, this is going to sound hokey. It's going to sound silly. He's like, but the difference between hokey and, just downright stupid is that hokey works, right? It's true. There's truth behind hokey. So if you're taking it for granted, well, then that's on you. But try to look yourself in the mirror and say, this doesn't work. that was surprising. My most recent revisitation of it was when I was getting ready to do some speaking on it. So I read it again. And what impacted me was how much I had been taken for granted. And I instantaneously knew that once I could get people's attention, that it was important, that being able to speak on the material would prove to be phenomenally successful. If you could get over the hump of the people who think they need it, think they're already doing well, and the other people don't think they need it. And
Right.
that's really the toughest part, is getting across the concept that it's even important enough to sit down and think about and talk about.
Wow. Yeah.
How about you?
That's such an odd thought. I think I'd find the same thing with my classes, but it amazes me as much time and energy as I have spent on the topic over most of my career, that people have to be convinced that it's important.
Yeah.
So that's amazing to me, because if you want to get to the buy behind attitude,
Right.
it's everything. We want to buy from people we like, right? We want to engage. We want to be with people who have a great attitude. Everybody's been with that individual who just sucks the air out of the room, right? They can't stop complaining.
Yeah. I'm related to some of those people.
I will not name names. I refuse. I will protect the innocent in this whole process. But yeah, there is certainly that element where it's just exhausting to be around people who are constantly complaining, whining, or just in general negative. And I find it so fascinating that some people are not self-aware enough to understand that.
Oh, that's a great terminology. That's great term for it. The self-awareness, right? The self-awareness that you need to have to even recognize the need for something like this.
Right. And to stop yourself from going down that spiral.
Yeah. It's the toughest sell with the happiest customers at the end, right?
Yes.
It's the idea that once you understand it, and it's not just a book, right? I'm not here to sell any books. Jeffrey sold enough of these books. It's the 10th anniversary of the first release. It's been phenomenally successful, but attitude as a concept altogether. And this is not the only book on attitude out there,
Yeah.
Just anything that anybody listening right now or watching can do is to go find something to tune this up, because this is the tide. When you say all boats rise and lower with the tide, your attitude and the way you approach what you do is the tide.
Mm-hmm.
And it's intertwined in everything that we do. It's not just business, it's personal, it's family, it's everything.
Right.
And its importance is far too often understated.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I liked, that kind of surprised me, may not be the right terminology for it, but I really love the picturing process in this book. So that idea of capturing a yes moment that you've had in your past, reliving it, kind of opening it up, dissecting it, understanding what made that such a great experience for you. And oftentimes, we've gone through this exercise even in class together, right? Where we list out, and it's things like the birth of a child or a grandchild, or the success of others, or conquering a fear that you didn't know you had, or maybe you did know you have, and really working through that. It rarely had much to do with things that we spend the most time on, which is work and social lives, and things that are right. It's just things that actually don't have a lasting impact on our lives.
Right.
And if you can stop and really evaluate those moments, and I never looked at it as a picturing exercise, right? I knew that if I could remember good times, that I would recreate that emotion in myself. But I never thought about taking that experience apart and understanding what was behind it, and really looking to create that in new experiences where I could say, yes, not just positive, not just, I'm okay, but yes, I'm going to conquer the world here. And I loved that exercise more than anything. I think that was probably my quote unquote, my surprise in the book.
Yeah. And So the last time I really read this book cover to cover was in January 2016. So, and in March of 2016, you'll appreciate this, I went on a golf trip to Florida, and we were playing at this resort between Tampa and Orlando. And I had a friend who played there just a year before me, was telling me all about this brutally difficult par three. It's like 235 yards. It's up the hill into the prevailing wind. And I'm like, that's wow, what would I hit? Okay, in that situation, what kind of a club would I hit? What kind of a shot would I have to hit? So we played the course a couple of times and didn't do real well on the hole. It was number 16. So it's near the end of the round. I get going. It's our last day there. And I am putting together the absolute round of my life. 16, 17, and 18 are the hardest holes on the golf course. And so I'm thinking, okay, if I can just play one or two over on my way in, I'll have the round of my life. And so I step up to 16, and everything is exactly how I had pictured it for the few months before. And I was thinking about, and the conditions were exactly perfect for how I prepared to hit my shot. And I step up and just calmly pull a 3-wood out of my bag and hit this absolute laser that just lands very, very softly and trickles out to about 4 feet. And I birdied this hole exactly how I had birdied it in my head for the previous 6 months. Right. And so now all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that's the last hump. I've already played these other holes a couple of times. I've hit good shots. I've got good memories of hitting good shots here. So I know I've just got to play my way in. I parred the last 2 holes, shot my age for the back 9, shot even par for the back 9, and shot 74 for the round. And I'm like floating. Now I have to get on an airplane and go home, which is like the worst thing, right? That's not what it's all about. The visualization works. The positive attitude, the positive approach, knowing what you can do. For me, that was a stock shot. It's not a club I often hit into a par 3. Don't get me wrong, but it was a tough shot, but it was a stock shot. And I'd rehearsed it and I'd practiced it and I'd hit it 100 times before. And I'm not a scratch golfer, right? I mean, that's not a shot I expect to pull off, but I was in the right place mentally, physically, emotionally. I knew what I could do and I did it. And that happens. And there's a reason that pro athletes have psychologists and mental coaches. And listen, if you don't think this is important, look at all your sports heroes. Look at all your business heroes. Look at all those people and look what they're doing. They get it.
Yep. That's exactly right.
So yeah, now my biggest issue is trying to get back to that place because that was in March and I came back to Michigan and my club sat alone for 3 weeks and I haven't regained that magic ever since. But I try. I don't ever stop trying.
Nice. Yes. No, you can't, especially in golf, you can't stop trying.
No.
We keep getting rained out here in Atlanta in the summer. So I've spent many a night of my golf league drinking margaritas.
The drinking league?
You can't go home, but you gotta hang out, right?
We have the ladies at my club have they have an 18-hole group that league that meets, I think, on Wednesday mornings. They have a 9-hole group that plays on Thursday nights, and they have a 4-hole group that plays on Thursday nights as well. And for some ladies, 4 holes is just plenty. And now it's time to go back to the clubhouse. And
there you go.
Others who, want to get their money's worth for the 9 holes. And it's kind of fun because sometimes you just got to have a margarita.
Yes, most times you have to have a margarita. I do anyway. I don't play. I love to play, but I don't play well enough for it to mean anything. So I'm all about the margarita.
Got it. Yeah. See, if I drink too much when I play, I start to lose focus, and then I get frustrated that I lost focus.
Yes.
So
no, we don't do that much drinking on the course, but we do afterwards.
Yeah. There's plenty of time to drink beer after I'm done.
Yes.
That's kind of my approach. But I'm here to do something and I'm here to win. So I'm not going to let this get in my way.
I love it. So, the other comment I wanted to make about both Jeffrey's book and just attitude in general is how much perspective comes into play. I always love the story that Zig Ziglar used to say about Chris Reeves. So Chris Reeves was being interviewed once, and it was after his accident. Those who don't know, he was paralyzed in a horseback riding accident. And he asked him, he said, how do you not lose faith? How do you not just get to a point where you're like, why me? And why am I in this situation? How do you go through the days without falling into that? And he
Mhm.
had the best answer. And he said, anytime, because you do have good days and you have bad days, whether you're in his situation or you're not, you have good and you have bad days.
Right.
The difference is what perspective or what measuring stick are you using to decide good or bad? And
Yeah.
he said, every time that I would ever feel sorry for myself, I would basically find a way to get to the local treatment center and go and talk and work with other people who are either in my situation or in a worse situation, and watch that, just like the positivity that just comes from somebody who is spending every ounce of energy to stay alive.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you realize that all the things that you worried about, and in his case, it was even things like, being able to walk and take care of himself. He said, it does not matter. He said, all of those concerns and that self pity would just disappear in perspective. And I have a story to share about perspective. It just happened over the last couple of days.
Cool.
And there's two players in the story. I just happened to be on the receiving end of conversations with both of them after these events.
Oh, cool.
One had, I know, it was actually quite, I was like, oh, this was perfect for my podcast. So one had a car issue that really, really kind of messed up his day. I mean, just really, that he had to get out of town. He was going to be late for a meeting. Had to go rent a car instead of taking his own car. And it's just, there was a lot of logistics around it. It ruined his entire day.
Sure.
It just, I mean, it was, you could just, it just like hear it, as he was telling the story and sharing the information. And then an hour later, another friend calls, and she just had both of her cars stolen out of her driveway. And they live in the country, so not in an area where they normally have ever had issues. Sure. And no problems with people coming by unannounced or things like that. And of course there were a lot of things that probably shouldn't have been in the cars.
Right.
So wallets and briefcases and things that, hindsight's 2020. You're like, what was I thinking?
Right.
And yeah. And so what was amazing is that once you get over the shock of it all, was just that recognition that, gosh, I'm so glad that all it was material things, because we were upstairs asleep. The kids were down the hallway. I mean, those things are so frightening. Thank God, all that we lost were our material possessions.
Right.
And I had both of these scenarios. One, which was actually kind of a bad day. I get it. But in the grand scheme of things, nothing, absolutely nothing by comparison. But the attitudes and that perspective was so drastically different between the two of them.
Right.
Then I was like, wow.
Yeah, almost the same thing happening to two different people within a couple of days in complete opposite reaction.
Yes, right. And it is one of those things. It's like, do you deal with it and let it just simmer and percolate and fuel it later on, or do you just deal with it?
Right.
And then go, thank God it didn't turn out to be anything more.
When it comes to situations like that, one of the things that I take away from the little gold book is focus on what you can control and what you can do about it rather than what you can't. It could be the worst day ever. Or, all right, well, if we're going to do anything tomorrow, we need to take care of this stuff right now. So let's get after it, and it's just, it's the can-do attitude. Yeah. Right. And
right.
what can you even focus on? So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I even spend a lot of time with my consulting clients talking about wasted energy and wasted emotion. So anytime, and you've seen this, I'm sure as well, where, the quota seems that much bigger than you expected. And you're like, oh my God, what were they thinking? And ultimately, there are times when you should absolutely talk those things through with your executives or your boss or whoever is in your chain of command, there are also times where you say, hey, can you control this? Can you change this number? Can you do anything about it? And if the answer is no, then stop, because every ounce of energy that you are spending on this issue that you perceive as an issue, you don't know if it's an issue or not. You may be able to blow out that number.
Right.
And in many cases where I have had clients that started out that way, it actually ends up being that they blow the number out. They just had to get out of their head to do it. And it's, so that wasted energy, wasted emotion, anxiety, and anticipation, those things there's no point in churning on those elements.
You got to get out of your own way.
Yeah.
And, my mentor in sales, one of his favorite things to do is say, I'm just trying to sell as much as I can, as fast as I can. Numbers this, numbers that. Sometimes I blow them out. Sometimes I don't, but I can control what I can control. And I know how to do my job, and I'm going to do it as well as I can. And ultimately, if that's not good enough for somebody, it'll be good for somebody else. So that kind of the ability to be able to do that, to be secure enough and vulnerable enough to say, look, and this might not work. Right. I mean, that's, I know it will. It's definitely good enough for me. And I know that I can make the money I need and have the success that I need in order to do this. If someone else decides to pull a number out of the sky, which is what most quotas are, to decide if that's good to be their measuring stick, they got to sleep well at night too. So whatever,
that's exactly right.
A lot of security. You got to have a lot of security in order to be able to do that.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah. That self-confidence to just kind of go forward.
Yeah. That's great stuff. What's your, if it's not the Little Gold Book of Yes Attitude, what's your next favorite book on attitude?
My next favorite book on attitude. Oh gosh, I had to think about that one. I don't know. I don't read a lot of attitude books.
Right.
I read a lot of business books. I'm a huge Stephen Covey fan. So I do love the 7 Habits books. I revisit those all the time. I love the paradigm shift stories that he tells in the 7 Habits. And I think oftentimes making over your attitude is exactly that, is changing your paradigm. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I love Andy Stanley, who is pastor here at North Point Community Churches in Atlanta. Actually, there's 7 or 8 churches here in the Atlanta area that he mentors and works with. He has a great leadership podcast, and he does a lot of work on just attitude and really kind of letting go of a lot of control fears. Sometimes bad attitudes can come from a sense of lack of control or loss of control.
Yes.
And so, getting to the root of that, I think is huge. So what about you? What are your favorites?
I was going to say the, either the 7 Habits, because I believe that's very much a book on attitude.
Yep.
And I think the Icarus Deception.
Yes. You actually sent that to me, or sent that note to me the other day.
Oh, no, it's crashing down behind me. This is a linchpin. There you go.
Nice.
It's another Godin book that's very closely related to this. It's necessary. The stack couldn't live without this book, because it challenges you to be better than you thought you could be, because someone else told you shouldn't do that. Right. So,
right.
A different paradigm of, I do not have to be interchangeable. I do not have to fit a mold. I need to be me, and I need to be the best version of me. And that's actually how I teach people, people, especially who are new to sales and like, okay, I took this sales job like I did. It sounded like a cool opportunity, but, what did I get myself into?
Right.
And it's like, okay, you've made friends, right? Yes. Okay. So you've proven you can do it. Let's start there. Let's get out of our own way. Let's forget this idea that you have to be a certain archetype or a certain person or to have a certain demeanor. No, you need to have a great attitude, and you need to believe that you can do what you need to do, and someone believed in you enough to give you the job.
Right. Right.
I mean, what are we doing? What are we missing? And that's what, really both of those books are about.
Hang on. I do have one Because I love my Dr. Seuss. Oh,
Yes.
the things you can think.
Oh, see, I've not read that one.
I love this book. In fact, I quote this book in just about every one of my classes.
Oh, I'm gonna find that. I need that because
Yes.
I give away a lot of copies of All the Places You'll Go, and that
Ah,
reminded me because that one, I'll tell you what, when things were not going well for me at work, when I needed to make a change, my son was just about a year and a half old, and he loved it when I read him that book. And I think that that is a book that anybody in business should read Monday morning before they get started, or maybe Sunday night, but Monday morning before you get started, and Friday evening when you're done. You
yeah,
read in the beginning of the week for outlook, and you read it when you're done for the week for perspective.
yeah,
And it gives you both,
yeah.
right?
I agree. So here, I'll read you the last page of the book. I
Love it.
won't spoil anything, I promise.
Oh, okay, good.
Think left and think right, and think low and think high. Oh, the things you can think if only you try.
Wow.
I mean, that's pretty much it. You don't need anything
No,
more.
no, that's it. The rest is just fluff. It's filler for the artwork.
That's right. Excellent. Oh,
Awesome.
that's too funny. Well, Icarus Deception, I think we're going to probably pick that one up sometime later on
We will.
and do a review on that one as well. So I'm looking forward to reading it. I've listened to a lot of Seth Godin's TED Talks and
Yeah.
podcasts, and he had I love his startup school. I think you actually even might have recommended that one to me,
Yep.
but I love, he's just got a different view on the state of business. And I really do like his philosophy.
He asks why and why not better than anybody else that I've ever heard, except maybe Malcolm Gladwell, who asks why and why not a lot, but from more of a historical retrospective perspective, right?
Sure.
I think Gladwell is like a modern day Paul Harvey, if you remember,
Right.
Rest of the story.
1,000-hour rule actually is why I started my business.
Okay. Really?
Yes.
That's interesting. So I love Gladwell, but when you listen to Seth Godin, he's like, well, why do we do it this way? And
Yeah.
he publishes a blog every morning. Sometimes it's 7 words, sometimes it's 700, but there's
Right.
something out there. And he talks about the things that we face every single day. I don't want to do it. The resistance, which Stephen Pressfield, another author and friend of his, has coined that term, and these demons that we need to exercise and we need to fight, but also, in terms of getting people out of their own way, tell me why you do this.
Right.
Tell me why you do this. Tell me why you don't do it this way. And if you have a good reason, then great. I don't mind that reason so long as you have a good reason. If you don't have a good reason, now you need to come up with a good reason why you continue to do it that way.
Right.
And I am always inspired by people who make me think.
Yeah.
I think more than anybody else I've ever read.
Yeah. But it's exhausting to ask those questions, right?
Oh,
I mean, it's
yeah.
exhausting to constantly ask why.
That's why
So we talk a lot about being exhausted as business owners, and I think you'll agree with this. If you ever want to understand and work through your challenges as an individual, start a business.
Yeah.
Right? Start a business and it will uncover every good, bad, and ugly thing you can imagine about your personality, about your strengths, your weaknesses, your fears, the things that, that keep you up at night.
Right.
It will uncover anything that you might have been hiding behind in corporate America. It will just lay it bare. And that question, always asking why,
Yep.
it's exhausting.
It is. And I think that's why we need people like Seth Godin to continue to ask them every single day to remind you, because it's very easy to run away from. And there are times where it's like, yeah, I know this is going to be good, but I don't feel like reading it. So you just kind of skim through it. Oh, it was a short one. Okay, fine. Or it was a really long one. I'm not going to read that anyway. But, you have to have that impetus. You have to have that tapping you on the shoulder, something that, the why is so important. It's just so important. And the thing is too, those questions are tough to ask. They should be tough to ask. They should be really tough to answer too. But when you can answer them confidently, you're good. I mean, you talk about Covey and habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. What's your personal mission statement? I don't have one of those. That's going to be hard. Well, yeah. But once you have that figured out, everything else falls into place because you've given it the space to fall into place.
Right.
It's supposed to be hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what makes you think. I tell my daughter all the time, it's like the things that are, you don't grow in the easy times.
No,
You're
no,
always
you
going to
don't.
grow in the stressful times or in the times that really kind of make you stretch.
And when times aren't going well, or when things aren't going well and times are tough, the way to stay focused and the way to keep moving forward is to appreciate the growth that's happening in those times
Yeah.
rather than the end result.
Right.
Sometimes you're going to fail. Okay, well, how did you grow? Are you growing through your failure, or was it just wasted failure? Because failure can be
Yeah.
valuable.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Excellent. So anything else we want to cover on the Little Gold Book?
My personal summary: attitude is more beneficial and more important than you can ever know.
Yeah.
And even when you know how important it is, once you study it, you will continue to grow in it. It's just, there's always some place to go with it. And it's more important than anybody ever gives it credit for.
Yeah. And I think if I could add to that, it's also contagious.
Oh, yeah.
So if you really want to
Both
see
ways.
change in the world, and, Gitomer talks a lot about not watching the news
Mhm.
for more than 30 minutes a day, not, spending too much time churning on one particular issue. You can look at 100 examples of times where 24/7 news on a particular event it just makes you teary eyed. It makes you sad, all those things. It just drains you after a while. And it's important to be informed. It certainly is. But there's a point where you have to say, what am I going to do about it? If I'm going to expend this much emotion, what am I going to do about it? And if you want to make a change in the world, work on your attitude first.
Yep.
And then it'll spread to others very quickly.
I 100% agree.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Why and the Buy podcast. We were talking about a yes attitude. And Jeff, I love it when we can talk in the middle of a podcast about our infamous golf stories.
Of which there are very many,
Yes,
right?
quite
There's
a
only so
few.
many we can work into a podcast, but I'm glad we were able to do that here.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed it. We love the topic of attitude, and it will come up again and again as you listen to us over the coming months. Jeff, I think our next topic is going to be all about fear.
Oh, I'm afraid. I'm shaking.
You should be
It-
very afraid.
It's a very important topic to discuss because we all have things that hold us back. And a lot of times it's just, being able to say those fears out loud, right?
Yeah.
That which does not have a name needs to be named.
Yeah.
And in order to get over it or to get through it, we need to know what it is and we need to dig in. So I'm really excited to talk about that next time.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to it. So until then, everyone, remember, when you understand your whys, your hows and your whats get much better. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Why and the Buy podcast. If you liked us, subscribe. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud, and really anywhere else you can get a podcast. And if you really liked us, then give us a 5-star review. We like those, and we like you too. Here at the Why and the Buy podcast, we've got our own house band. Christie and I think they're absolutely perfect for what we're trying to do with this podcast, and we hope you think so too. If you like them as much as we do, then you should check them out. They're called Haskins, and they're based in southeastern Michigan. You can find their music and more at haskinsmusic.com. Go check them out.